It is a land of ancient secrets and exotic myths. Of searing heat and legendary journeys. These are the images Arabia evokes. Here life must go on under a burning sun, with precious little water to sustain it. Though its deserts are forbidding places, within Arabia's arid expanse dwells abundant and varied wildlife. What is little known is the Arabia of mountains and ancient forests. Here resides the memory of a time when Arabia was a greener, wetter land, many thousands of years ago. A living reminder of its African origins, its wildlife was isolated when the land was torn from the mother continent. It has long been known as Arabia, land of the Arabs. It is the largest peninsula on Earth, spanning more than 1 million square miles. Bordered by sea on 3 sides, it took shape some 35 million years ago, when a great fracture developed in the Earth's crust. Gradually, the rift widened, until Arabia all but broke away. Salt water from the Indian Ocean poured into the rift, creating a sea nearly 1,300 miles long. This is where our story of the secret Arabia begins, in the fertile waters of the southern Red Sea. As the oceanic water flows into the Red Sea, it sweeps around islands that are largely barren, though there are mangroves fringing the bays. The Farasan Islands in the southern Red Sea are made entirely of fossil coral. The surrounding waters teem with marine life. The flow from the Indian Ocean has triggered an explosion of tiny life forms, plankton, that's consumed by a multitude of fish. Blooms of jellyfish feed voraciously on the drifting plankton that often spreads over hundreds of square miles. Higher up the food chain, there are hunters like the barracuda that prey on smaller fish. It's here, too, that the great manta rays come to feed. These elegant creatures, which sweep through the water like huge birds, have a wingspan of up to 16 feet, yet they live entirely on plankton. They have to consume vast quantities to sustain their powerful bodies. Plankton is funneled into the mouth with flexible lobes that hang like jowls. Then it is sieved through the ray's gigantic gills. The mantis swim in formation, one behind the other, in an enormous circle. Yet the circle is staggered, so each manta can plow through an undisturbed stream of plankton. This feeding technique may seem elaborate, but mantas are sophisticated creatures. To hone in on prey, they rely on their acute sense of smell and cruise to where the currents converge. Scientists believe they feed in groups as a safety measure. Sharks sometimes attack solitary mantas, like this one, whose fin has nearly been bitten off. In these southern waters, the reefs blossom with soft coral. As the currents begin to flow, carrying nutrients with them, the corals stretch out their tentacles and feed. Clouds of microscopic life drift through this underwater garden. Floating plankton is trapped by sea ferns. Fire coral stuns any plankton with powerful stinging cells. The burrowing barnacle uses a subtler means. Casting out a fan-shaped fishing net of sorts, it combs the currents for passing plankton. The worm shell, too, is buried within the coral, but uses a translucent substance to fish the waters. Every 15 minutes or so, it winds in its catch. The seabed, strewn with tiny bits of coral rubble, offers few hiding places from predators. Burrows are useful, And sometimes partnerships arise, like this one, between the goby and the pistol shrimp. The goby does sentry duty, while the shrimp maintains the bunker. With its superior eyesight, the goby is more likely to spot enemies. Its comrade is nearly blind. The shrimp, in turn, is a good lieutenant, industrious and hardworking. The goby only leaves for short periods, feeding on microscopic creatures that live in the sand. It uses its gills as a filtering system. Some of its elusive prey burrow only during daylight hours and rise to the surface come nightfall. Nocturnal plankton, ushered in by the current, also rise to the surface, and fish follow. The creatures of the night emerge in all their bizarre finery. This crab decorates its shell with soft coral. A zebra's soul slides cautiously, its eyes like twin periscopes scanning for predators. A sea urchin crawls forward, a mobile pincushion bearing a deadly arsenal, 1,000 tiny sacks of poison. Stinging anemones are used by a hermit crab to fortify its shell. Psyllid worms, anchored in a sponge, become the target for a cube boxfish. The coral islands of the Red Sea are mostly lifeless, but in the shallow bays, mangrove swamps generate their own ecosystems. These resilient trees and the swamps around them are beacons for bird life. There are many varieties of heron in the Farasan Islands. Each has its own place in the system. The giant of the family is called, appropriately, the Goliath heron. It stands more than 4 feet tall. The white reef heron is roughly 1/3 its size. The short-legged green heron, smallest of the Farasan Islands family, patrols the shallows at the water's edge. The roots of the mangroves are a nursery for young fish, but this is hardly a safe haven. A reef heron disturbs the fish by bounding among them with kangaroo-like leaps. A brilliantly effective way of flushing out its quarry. Goliath herons impale their prey, using their beaks as spears. Then they swallow the fish head first. Mangroves fringe the shallows along the southern end of the Red Sea, but farther north, the seabed plunges steeply, only a short distance from land. The edges of the Red Sea are still moving apart nearly 3/4 of an inch every year as the rift between Arabia and Africa grows larger. In this clear, deep water, some corals are known to live 1,000 feet down. Sea fans grow to more than 4 feet across and orient their surfaces to face the current so that they can catch food in their branches. Most marine life is concentrated near the top of the reef wall. Sharks have always been seen as sinister terrors of the deep. Their reputation as man-killers has made them symbols of primeval destruction. Yet, as Red Sea divers can testify, surprisingly, sharks are seldom aggressive. Sharks are discriminating predators. Like the great cats, the lion, and the leopard, they perform an essential role in their ecosystem. Their presence here is a sure sign of the reef's good health. The warm, clear waters of the Red Sea are ideal for marine life. Walls of coral stretch for thousands of miles beneath the surface, and where there is coral, there are likely to be red anthias. They move out from their coral refuge in schools, which make them less likely to be picked off by predators. Anthias are the signature fish of the Red Sea. The females can be distinguished by their paler orange color. The males are red, larger, and outnumbered by females 100 to 1. When a male dies, he is replaced by the largest female. Incredibly, she has the ability to turn into a male. This fish, though, is an imposter. It's the Midas blenny, named after the legendary king with the golden touch. Unlike other blennies, the Midas ventures out into the mainstream, but only in the company of anthias. It behaves exactly like one of them. So successful is this masquerader that its ruse was only discovered 21 years ago. When it's not feeding with the anthias, the Midas shelters in its burrow like other blennies. When the coast is clear, the Midas resumes its double life. The wide shore, built of coral, stretches for many miles. At the northernmost end of the Red Sea, it gives way to rugged mountains that crowd the water's edge. This is where much of the sand that forms the great Arabian interior is generated. And storms, in turn, occasionally sweep the sands back, washing enormous quantities of silt out over the coastline. Underwater, this deep sand is a refuge for Silneri garden eels. At the first sign of danger, they sink tail first into their burrows. The Silneri is only found in the Red Sea. It too feeds off plankton carried by the current. It's one of the largest of the garden eels. A mature male is more than 3 feet long. The eels sway in the current like so many reeds in the breeze. The males position themselves roughly a body's length apart. This seagrass is actually a flowering plant and once grew on the shoreline. Over the millennia, as it was gradually submerged, it acquired a tolerance for salt water. Now it provides a refuge for creatures adept at camouflage. Carefully hidden in the seagrass, an animicus scares off attackers with a spectacular display. One of the most poisonous fish in the sea, it brandishes a row of venomous spines along its back. The sea moth is another creature that avoids attack by imitating the textures of the sand. There are countless ways to exploit these waters, and as many forms that life has taken here. The Red Sea is a magnificent treasure house of marine life that remains largely undisturbed by man. It is one of the few places on Earth where the natural balance remains unchanged. Much of this world is still a mystery, but from what is known, we have a picture of an ecosystem that is complex, subtle, and unique. The full story of the Red Sea, with its rich variety of species and great range of habitats, is only just beginning to unfold. Every year, more than 6 feet of water evaporates from the sea. The wind carries the moist air inland up over the foothills. The moisture rises to 12,000 feet, to the heights of Arabia's great mountain barrier. The rain clouds that form make this the most verdant region in all Arabia. Through the summer months, storms drench the upper slopes of the barrier. While the rest of the country bakes in the summer heat, the mountains remain cooler, sheltering the last of Arabia's tropical vegetation. Beneath the mountain foothills, dammed water has become a major resource for both farmers and wildlife. The lakes attract thousands of birds, which use them as rest stations on their migratory paths across Arabia. Many resident birds harken back to the true origins of the region's wildlife. Hornbills are more familiar as birds of tropical Africa, but the gray hornbill thrives in these humid foothills. Another with African roots is the brilliantly plumed Abyssinian roller. The male roller is one of nature's most skillful aerobatic performers. He makes a series of early morning flights to advertise his territory, but saves his most daring maneuvers to attract a mate. Pairs often take to the air together, but as an exhibitionist, the male is on his own. The female roller watches the aerial display closely. Only afterwards will she mate. High above the foothill plains, the mountains of the southwest have long been the most populated region. The Romans called this area Arabia Felix, Fortunate Arabia. It was the source of precious goods like frankincense and myrrh. The farmers' crops are a banquet for mountain birds. Despite the token deterrent, weavers and linnets feast in the wheat fields. The Yemen linnet is found only in these southwestern mountains. Its stubby beak is ideal for shredding the husk from the wheat. Agamid lizards have a remarkable ability to change color. Starting the day a mottled brown to match the rocks, the dominant males gradually assume a bright fluorescent blue. The gaudy new look and the bobbing of the head are techniques to attract a mate, but there are hazards in such flamboyant displays. The gray-headed kingfisher has a taste for lizard. In this fertile region of Arabia, the land is terraced to the highest possible level. Where the slopes are too steep to be farmed, wild juniper trees take over. In the high cliffs, a troop of baboons have made their quarters upon a rocky shelf. These are Hamadryas baboons, a species also found in Africa. There are more than 350,000 in the southern Arabian mountains. The ancient Egyptians venerated the Hamadryas, perhaps because their chatter heralded the sunrise. The baboon's success in Arabia is due to its versatility. Its range extends over 500 miles along the barrier, from the rocky heights to the farthest reaches of the juniper forest. The Hamadryas baboon has a social structure second only to man's in its complexity. Grooming, which baboons do incessantly, has a double function. It keeps their skins clear of parasites, and it strengthens social bonds. The basic family unit places several females and their young under the care of a dominant male, although his authority is often challenged by younger rivals. If a dominant male loses one of these trials of strength, his females and their progeny become the spoils of the victor. Baboons depend upon group support for survival. These juvenile games are an important part of their training. Play develops and strengthens family bonds and helps to establish rank in the hierarchy. Usually, mothers reject babies that are not their own, but any weaned orphans will be cared for by young males. The baboons forage over a wide area, descending most days to feed on figs in the wadis, the floodplains below the mountain wall. Fig trees grow in great variety and attract all kinds of wildlife. Fruit bats have fed on figs during the night, but as soon as the sun comes up, they shelter in the shaded awning of a palm tree. They sleep most of the day, but before dozing off, they groom themselves. They are fastidious about cleaning their feet, which provide a secure grip even when they hang upside down to sleep. Many of Arabia's rarest species rely on juniper forests for their survival. These ancient woodlands once extended in a vast belt as far north as the Mediterranean. Now they are confined to the southern ranges. Most of the forest was lost during the great climatic change 5,000 years ago, when temperatures started to rise and Arabia became a drier, hotter place. The process continues to this day. The juniper on the lower slopes no longer grow to their former height. To the north, the mountains become progressively drier. In some places, only a single stand of euphorbia remains, where lush forests once flourished. In these harsh surroundings dwells the ibex, one of the few creatures that survived the parching of the land. The ibex owes its longevity in part to its agility on this difficult terrain. The males constantly lock horns in tests of strength. Ibex are related to the mountain goat. Their cloven hooves expand to grip the rock, and their soft inner pads cling like suction cups. Female ibex drift away from the herd when they're about to give birth. The newborn are hidden away in a rock crevice. The kids are quickly on their feet, taking their first tentative steps. And so their nurturing begins against this bleak and inhospitable backdrop. Rain is a rarity here, and the dry winds carve gaps into the Great Barrier. Deep gullies eroded by fierce gales break up the mountains and turn them into a maze of sand and stone. Behind the mountain barrier lie the great stone deserts of the interior, vast areas of volcanic debris. This desolate moonscape is pockmarked with craters, some over 2 miles across. To the south stretches the immense Arabian sand desert, sculpted eons ago by monsoon winds. These corridors run for hundreds of miles, and the great dunes rise to 800 feet or more. Like all great deserts, the Rub al Khali has a forbidding beauty. For 6 months of the year, no one ventures into this burning world. That's why it's called the empty quarter. Then, as the weather cools, the camels come, as they have for thousands of years. Travelers called the camel the ship of the desert because it carried men and goods across oceans of sand. Here in southern Arabia, more than 3,500 years ago, those desert voyages began. They marked the beginning of the Bedouin way of life. Every year, Hussein bin Rashid al-Ajami and his son Saeed spend the entire winter traveling hundreds of miles through the Rub al Khali. This is when both nomads, Bedouin and camel, begin their journey. They must search the vastness for pockets of green where rare rainstorms have brought on plant growth. This will be their winter grazing. Hussein, who's 66, has been venturing into the Rub al Khali with his family since he was a child. Today, he has 90 camels. If the pastures are good, the herd can go through the entire winter without drinking water. Man and camel are mutually dependent. The Bedouins rely on the camel for milk and meat, and the camel needs the Bedouins to guide it through the desert. Both adapted ingeniously to a harsh environment and made the desert a home.
هذه مما يدلنا على محبة الإبل وحنا ما عشنا إلا بإذن الله سبحانه.
Let me tell you why we love the camel. We live by God's grace and through the blessing of the camel. In the old days, we had few possessions, but our camels answered our every need. All we needed was enough to eat, the chance to hunt, and we had dates.
وشرفها الرب عز وجل في السوالف اللي احنا نسنا من الأولي ولا حنا ما نفهم إلا شيء نسمعه.
We believe that camels are noble and that God himself ennobled them.
الرب عز وجل.
There's a story our ancestors told of how God Almighty created camels from a cloud. With his power and artistry, he fashioned them from a cloud. But when the camel came down from the heavens, the earth was not yet made, and the camel floated about in the air like a bird without a perch. So God created the earth for her, and formed the mountains and the desert sands for her. And so the camel was made welcome on earth. This is a true story, God willing.
The earliest images of Arab warriors show them riding to battle on camels. The wheel had been in use for 3,000 years, but around 500 BC, camels began to be used as pack animals, making them the most efficient form of transport throughout the Middle East. By late Roman times, wheeled vehicles had all but vanished. Trade would continue to depend on the camel until the invention of the automobile. While the camel became a servant, the lion remained a quarry. It was hunted for sport in the northern deserts of Arabia. The last time one was seen in the wild was at the turn of the century. The reem gazelle was also hunted in ancient times. Assyrians pursued it into the desert to test the accuracy of their bows and the strength of their spear arms. The hunting of the reem continued until modern times. Today, it is nearly extinct. Perhaps 1,000 live in the wild. This is not a herd in flight. It's a male reem rounding up females. Early winter has brought the rutting season, and competition for females is intense. Although the reem are nomadic, during the rut, the dominant male marks out a territory to gain temporary possession of all the females in the herd. But he has to fight for them. These fights are more than just ritual. The ream's sharp horns can inflict deep wounds. The victor secures his territory by rubbing secretion onto a rock. Droppings and urine are also used as a scent mark. The male ream is distinguished by his longer horns, and he exudes a black substance from glands just beneath his eyes. This too is used to mark his territory. Throughout the rut, these trials of strength continue. Rival males are not just forced to retreat, they must be driven away from the victor's territory. Unlike the nimble gazelles, camels can be ungainly when mating and sometimes require assistance from the Bedouin. Hussein's son, Saeed, has been handling camels all his life. He has great respect for the animals that are his livelihood and a thorough knowledge of their behavior. The male first checks to see if the female is in heat. Saeed has tied the female's leg to curb her bucking. This reduces the chances of injury during mating. There are those who claim that camels would have died out without the aid of humans. Camels are the only hooved animals to mate in a crouched position. A strong bull camel can service up to 70 females in one season. Saeed works diligently to improve the quality of his herd.
الناقة المزيونة يمكن ما في البل كلها كل ذود إلا ناقة واحدة سوداء.
In a whole herd, there may only be one really good camel. She should be black, a good mover, tame, with plenty of milk. Her hump should be big, but that depends on grazing. If God gives her good grazing, she'll get fat and her neck should be long. Everything about her should be large and full. She should walk in front of the herd, and if there is a crowd of camels and her owner calls to her, she comes to him.
The camel seems to have been custom designed for the desert. It can travel up to 100 miles a day with its unique stride, a pace rather than a trot. The riding camel can maintain speeds of 11 miles an hour. The broad pads of the camel's feet spread its weight and keep it from sinking into soft sand. Its long legs keep the bulk of its body high above the sand surface and allow it to scan the horizon for food. The camel's teeth never stop growing. Instead, they are kept ground down by the tough desert plants it thrives on. Its lower jaw is narrower than its upper jaw, so food can be chewed on one side of the mouth at a time. The eyes are protected by a double row of lashes. In a sandstorm, the camel keeps its eyes shut, though it can see well enough to keep moving through the thin membrane of its eyelids. Its large nostrils can be closed to prevent sand from getting into its lungs. But well-equipped as it is, the camel is not all things to the Bedouin. Hussein hunts in the old way, and when in pursuit of hare, he uses a dog known as a saluki. In the past, salukis were trained to hunt gazelle and bustard, much-needed sources of meat. The saluki is one of the most ancient breeds of dog. It is believed to have originated in southern Arabia 7,000 years ago. When the hare is caught, it is brought back alive so it can be properly dispatched according to Islamic law. As they lead their retinue of animals through the Rub al-Khali, the Bedouin have always been dependent on wells dug by their ancestors. These ancient water sources were hewn out of rock outcroppings that burgeoned amid the sand. They were long distances apart, and the water was often brackish and foul-tasting. The wells are seldom used today, but they're still maintained as a time-honored courtesy to other travelers and as an emergency source of water. Today, the well is on the move, and water is transported to even the most remote corners of the desert. Saeed brings the well to his camels. He waters them once a week so they'll be in peak condition. The toughest part of their journey is yet to come. The camel is singularly adapted to this harsh climate. It can lose as much as 40% of the water in its body without perishing. A man dies if he loses only 12%. A camel doesn't store what it drinks. It absorbs water into its bloodstream and tissues. Saeed has to ration because a thirsty camel can drink a fifth of its body weight in a single session, at the rate of 3 gallons a minute. While camels have water brought to them, other denizens must wait for the rare desert rains. Plants grow best where water has been trapped at the base of the dunes. Before the water sinks into the sands, a drama is played out in thousands of pools across Arabia. These muddy pools are the home of tiny crustaceans that have remained virtually unchanged for 100 million years. Dormant tadpole shrimp eggs spring into life. Tadpole shrimp are highly specialized creatures and are older than the desert itself. Their fertilized eggs can lie dormant for 15 years before water comes and brings them to life. In a few days, they grow from tiny eggs into adult shrimp nearly 3 inches long. Their life is desperately short. They must reach maturity and mate before the pools dry out. Once the eggs are laid, the life cycle is complete. Then, as the pools heat and dry up, the oxygen becomes depleted, and the shrimp struggle to breathe. So, a generation of shrimp passes in a matter of days. Their decaying bodies will fertilize the sand and provide rich food for the next generation, which may not arrive for many years when the rains come again. Other creatures live without rainwater. The night forms a crust on the desert sand that allows the scorpion to dig out a shelter from the sun. Reem gazelle can spend years without drinking water. They take some moisture by licking the morning dew off their coats, and like other desert gazelle, they feed in the early morning when the dew is heaviest on the plants. Only a few tough plants can survive in the Rub al Khali. Some grow far apart and spread their shallow roots over a wide area to take advantage of dew and occasional rains. Oryx find moisture in the summer by digging up plants that have roots with a high water content. Oryx are well suited for desert life. Their white coats reflect the blazing sunlight. Sedge plants spring up after rare winter rains. They're not very nutritious, but camels obtain moisture from them. Camels moving through the desert do little damage to the plant life. They take just a few bites out of each plant before moving on. They are in tune with conditions here. There are other animals that are not true desert dwellers. In modern times, watered by tankers and given fodder, sheep and goats have begun grazing far deeper into the Arabian deserts. The vegetation here cannot support their increasing numbers. They eat almost everything that grows. Some native grasses only survive when hedged in by thorn bushes, where they are out of reach of the marauders. When the rangeland is overgrazed, the plant life may never recover. But in wildlife reserves, protected from this kind of mass invasion, the desert has shown a remarkable capacity to revive itself. And where the desert has recovered, wildlife flourishes. Nomadic desert birds, like the houbara bustard, need this variety of plant and insect life before they will settle to breed. They will thrive as long as the environment remains undisturbed. As for Saeed's camels, there is less and less vegetation in sight. Now they must double the distance they travel in a day. It's the calving season, and a female is about to give birth. Her timing couldn't be worse. The pregnant female cannot be allowed to delay the herd. She'll be driven onward until she's ready to give birth. There's little grazing here, and they'll need to travel 25 miles a day to reach their next feeding ground, though the terrain ahead is difficult. They must cross the salt flats or sapkas, and then, towering beyond, a range of sand mountains that rise to 1,000 feet or more. The sapkas are heavy going. Beneath the salty crust, there's thick mud, and the camels can easily become stuck, or even sink without a trace. As the female gives birth, the Bedouins prepare for a deception. They're going to switch the newborn calf for one that's a week old. Its own mother hasn't enough milk, and the hope is that the new mother will adopt it. So, the newborn calf is hidden from view. And now the week-old calf, smeared with the newborn's placenta, is introduced to his adoptive mother. The week-old calf's real mother makes a suspicious circuit or two. Meanwhile, the newborn calf is taken to the truck. It will be raised by hand until it's old enough to keep up with the herd. The deception won't be a success until the new mother allows the week-old calf to suckle. At last, the week-old starts to nurse. The bond is sealed. Its new mother will provide milk both for him and for Hussein's family for the next 12 months. The camel has ruled the desert for 4,000 years, but its reign is over. It's been outdone by the four-wheel drive. Today, the automobile can go anywhere in the desert. The wheel has come back to win the day. The old camel trails have been swallowed up by highways. Once the driving force of a great culture, the camel may end its days as a passenger. Hussein has seen Arabia totally transformed in his lifetime, and now the desert he loves is much altered by the modern age. Saeed, too, has seen fundamental changes taking place in the desert itself. Much of the wildlife has been displaced. Some animals have come perilously close to extinction and have only been saved by a determined conservation drive. Now, new breeding programs are introducing more species back into the wild. But isolated rescue attempts may not be enough. All life in the desert is finally dependent on vegetation. If plant life is disturbed and the rangeland overrun, then a delicately poised ecosystem will be destroyed. The Arabian Peninsula is unexpectedly rich in exotic wildlife and great natural beauty. Surrounding this magnificent land are some of the most fertile seas on Earth. The verdant forests are precious reminders of a lusher time long gone. Through vast seas of sandy desert, we can glimpse two Arabias, the natural one of the present and the romantic image of Arabia's past. Each is deserving of admiration and respect. Together they form a great inheritance that is only now being revealed to the world.
We hope you have enjoyed this presentation from the National Geographic Video Library.
On the island of Bali, life is a gift from the gods. In return, the people give the gods everything: the fruits of their labor, their art, their reverence. For in this mystical land, life itself is a dance of devotion and an endless cycle of creation and destruction. National Geographic is your guide to a world of ancient spirits and sacred traditions. Bali, masterpiece of the gods. The African night is alive with mysterious creatures. The king of beasts rules the plains and silently stalks its prey. But when the hunt is over, the fiercest competition has just begun. Africa's darkness is pierced to reveal its deepest mysteries. Join National Geographic on the prowl with the lions of the African night.